My name is Lindsay VanHulle, and I'm a deputy editor covering electrification at Automotive News. And we think about autonomy, we talk a lot about the vehicles themselves, but when you think about mobility, it's not just electrification, it's not just autonomous vehicles, it's really an infrastructure story as well. And that's what we're going to get into today, talking about everything from depots, the capital financing, the construction, the operation, and really how industry and government can partner together to learn from places where it's been done and to extend the model to new places where it has not happened yet. So with that, I will have the panelists introduce themselves.
Hey, I'm McLean, and I lead market development at Voltera. We're the leading provider of autonomous tri-tail hubs in North America.
I'm Alessandra Carreon, and I am the Chief Climate Officer for Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, or EGLE, and our office leads the state's climate mitigation plan implementation.
Hello, my name is Erin Galiger. I'm the Director of North American Markets for Rocsys. We build a platform for hands-free charging, operating in ports, distribution, and robotaxis.
So to start, Erin, what is a successful autonomous vehicle charging hub look like? What kind of energy is required? What does the station look like? And what are the differences in charging needs for personally owned EV and autonomous vehicle?
Well, personally owned depots look a little more as for personal vehicles are really built for, on demand when the consumers want to charge. Oftentimes they have alternative opportunities to charge, whether at home or work. And an AV depot is really specifically for vehicles that are operating essentially 24/7. They come to the depot maybe 2 to 4 times a day to charge. So it's really designed for the fastest throughput you can get. I'll also have John talk about the size of these depots. There's kind of I'd say the 2026 archetype of a depot is pretty defined. How that looks in the future will probably change, but they're fairly big compared to the public charging sites that we see. But our focus is really about once those depots are developed, how do you make sure that the vehicles are getting charged as fast as possible, predictably, and back on the road to make revenue. So that's going to be some of the key pieces. Other tasks that happen during that charging cycle might be inspections, either from a safety standpoint or compliance standpoint, also a quick clean. There's a number of other maintenance and lost and found tasks that could happen. Those could be all at one central depot, but we're also seeing this archetype of depots that are specifically for meeting that 3 to 4 charging sessions a day, and then different depots that might have more the edge case of how do you take care of this vehicle that might not happen at such a cadence.
And John, a lot of the robotaxis and autonomous vehicle operations out in cities, what are the requirements, when you think about an urban area with a high density land use, and just how they're big, what does that look like from kind of an urban density standpoint?
Yeah, I guess to start, a good hub is one that gets our customers live and doing pay rides in new market as quickly as possible. That is absolutely what makes a really good hub, makes our customers happy. I think in general we're looking for a plot of land that's in the ODD, so that's the area where the fleet's able to operate. One that can get permitted in a timeline that works for our customers, one that has appropriate zoning, one we can get power to, and one that has neighbors that are amenable to what we're doing. I think size-wise, on the smaller side, maybe an acre, maybe 3 acres for a bigger spot. 40 stalls on the smaller side, maybe 80 to 90 for a bigger, think 10 plus megawatts maybe for the power that we typically run to one of our sites. And that might support 350 to 400 vehicles today. As the vehicles improve and we run more power, maybe up to twice as many vehicles.
Erin, you were talking ahead of the panel, and you mentioned that this is the first conference on electric autonomous vehicle charging outside the West Coast. Are And so I'm interested in kind of the lessons that you take from depot projects on the West Coast in places where it's established, and how that could be translated or extended to other parts of the country, like Michigan and the West.
I think a lot of the things are similar, of like what the challenges are. John speaks a lot to like the permitting, getting the power to the site. Our focus is how do you get the most value out of that site once it is live. So I think a lot of those pieces are really similar. We're designing a system that can work anywhere where a human can work. So that's going to be outdoors, in the snow, in the rain, in a haboob if you're in Phoenix. So there's going to be a lot of different environments that we have to design for. So we're trying to take all of those learnings and bring it to new markets. The other piece that's really important for our customers is being able to work with existing infrastructure that they have in the ground and having that flexibility for as their fleet changes. I talk a lot about how this is like the 2026 fleet. This is the 2026 depot. They're trying to design for 10 years down the road. So their vehicles are probably going to change because the vehicles are getting a lot of miles. They're probably going to switch out at a shorter cadence than a typical vehicle might if you were a taxi fleet. So it's really about designing for that ultimate flexibility and both for power levels and vehicles.
Anything to add from your experience?
No, I think Erin captured it pretty well.
Alessandra, what did, when you think about what's working on the West Coast and as you said, Michigan, what are the things that you're most interested to learn about, or the things that kind of pique your interest in what you're exploring in Michigan?
In Michigan, our climate mitigation plan is called the McLean Climate Plan, and there are a series of strategies outlined in the plan, all intended to help the state reach its economy-wide goal of decarbonization by 2050. So when it comes to our office's role, my role in implementing that plan, it's really agnostic to the type of technology that can help us get there when it comes to transportation. One of the strategic pillars is to electrify vehicles and increase public transit. But when we talk about electrifying vehicles, I think the lesson here is the same as for any other electric vehicle fleet, both in terms of light duty and heavy duty charging depots. But I think there is an added layer around, ultimately for AV charging depots, the question of land use and, of course, just socialization with the technology among communities, but certainly climate smart land use, the opportunity it presents in affording more efficiencies and thinking through just planning, land use planning, and the different departments that brings together. Inherently, like I said, we're agnostic to it because AVs on their own aren't really a climate solution, but when we think about the opportunity for the electrification paired with our state clean energy goals and the laws that back that, I think we're really interested in trying to learn how those combination of factors, electrification, autonomous vehicle planning, the uniqueness of planning for AVs can help us meet our state targets.
John, you talked a bit in the beginning about all of the things that have to come together as quickly as possible. When you're looking at how to make it successful, who are the key stakeholders that need to be engaged and how do you go about doing that?
Yes, so I think there's four main stakeholders you need to really be successful in your market. So that's the cities and the other authorities that have jurisdiction. It's the utilities that are providing the power. It's the property owners that you transact with to find a site, and it's the neighbors. And I think for all of them, the one thing that's constant is just early and persistent engagement, right? So for the cities, it's and for the utilities both, right? Engagement starts not months, but typically years ahead of time, right? The development process from the time that we get started could be 18 months on the shorter end in some larger metropolitan areas. So it's engagement is communicating what's good, right? With Voltera and our customers, we're bringing safe, affordable electric transportation to new communities, so we want to communicate that. And then we want to really make sure that the city, the utilities, and everybody else knows what we're up to, and then we can work with them and get some. I I think from our perspective, the biggest thing that we can get at any stage is clarity, right? That the uncertainty is what stops capital from flowing and what stops development from happening.
Yeah, and it sounds like then starting early helps build that trust and so that those conversations and that dialogue can really unfold.
Yeah, I think look, our utility friends, I don't know if we have, I think we might have some in the audience, right? Our utility friends are under incredible pressure these days, right? There's a number of new industries that consume a huge amount of power, so we want to be good partners to them, right? We want to make sure that they understand where we're going to be building and when we need to get power and how much of it, and we understand that they have their own processes. So yeah, so we want to be good partners to them. And we know that the utilities talk to each other, right? So we know that in a given city, we might do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hubs for a given customer, so we know that we're going to be encountering each other again. We want to have a really good relationship with them.
Can I add something about the utility conversation? This is totally anecdotal, so it's not a one size fits all. But I was just chatting with a utility where they have these AV hubs and kind of talking about like the difference between EV charging versus AV charging. They're really excited about EVs because if the utilization is so dang high, it becomes base load. So it's just for them something really exciting where in EV charging you might have, these 150, 300 kilowatt or even greater swings based on time of day. You can kind of have demand charges by charging customers, hey, maybe don't use this at this time. But for the AVs, utilization is so high that they're just really excited about the baseload opportunity. So anecdotal, but I think something that's interesting if you don't have those depots here yet.
Alessandra, you were talking earlier about both kind of some formal and informal ways that the state can engage with different entities looking at kind of these charging depots. Can you talk a little bit about what mission you provide?
Yeah, yes, and on the point of who to engage, I think it's always a great idea to engage with state agencies and departments. I'm biased. I also used to serve as a commissioner at the Michigan Public Service Commission, so my answer is informed by a couple of agency perspectives at this point, but from EGLE's perspective, especially considering the time frame of the My Healthy Climate Plan, I think that there's certainly an opportunity for companies or projects that are looking to be sited in Michigan to consider how different locations, even though each context is unique and bespoke, ultimately the goal at the state level is that we can provide resources to all communities to make sure that we reach these climate goals. And so where there are opportunities to either take advantage of state resources, funding, whenever that's available, there's also kind of that added benefit of having that engagement sort of built in where the state has relationships with local units of government or community-based organizations. And again, we have our own versions of plans or roadmaps that can kind of tie into what the project timelines are. And then certainly, to Erin's point about certainty for utilities and being able to predict or forecast load, I think there are a lot of more formal methods of engaging within the state, say with a utility commission that look like transportation electrification plans or participating in work groups. So there are a lot of avenues, and the state is very intentional about providing, at least in Michigan, providing these forums for engagement so that there are multiple voices at the table that can help inform statewide plans that then, again, in turn, might support local units of government or local communities as they're thinking through these topics.
So financing and funding were what piece that kind of came up in that last question. John, what kind of capital is necessary to get AV charging kind of off the ground? Thinking about, we're all kind of familiar with the public retail kind of charging station. AV station is obviously much bigger. So.
The RoboPi is big. In the U.S. alone, it's certainly billions of dollars would be. Just to, if we were to think about this, right, a large hub in a major U.S. metropolitan area could be $15 to $20 million in capex on the investment side. You figure in a really big city, somebody might have 5 to 10 of those. So that right there, and that's just for one fleet, could easily be $200 million in capex. Multiply that times 40 markets in the U.S. and the numbers get really big, really quickly. And I think from our perspective at Voltera, right, for a fleet that wants to deploy and grow quickly, they're typically not set up to have asset asset or assets like that on the balance sheet, right? Their human capital and their actual capital are focused on managing fleets, deploying in new cities. So this is a great match for Voltera, right? Because we like to have that asset on our balance sheets. And when we work with our customers, really what we're able to provide them is a next generation, zero CapEx hub. That for them, it's a very straightforward per stall, per month transaction, and they're able to have for a long time a really amazing hub where they can do all of their cleaning, servicing, maintenance, data offload, charging facilities for their employees, all the security associated. So I think it's really important that in the market, right, that there's partners like Voltera that can partner with the AV fleets and enable them to scale faster and with more capital efficiency than they be able to do.
Yeah, that kind of scale, but where does that financing come from? Is it entirely private sector? Is we heard about public-private partnerships in the last session. Is that a key piece of this too?
So on our side, we're backed by two of the largest private equity firms in the world, right? BlackRock and EQT. So yeah, certainly there is money available for the deals.
How can policymakers though, kind of encourage that private sector investment? Thinking about we're going to locate these charging hubs, we want to establish one. Also, what are the kinds of things that Michigan has available, and what are the ways? If there's a project that's in mind that you could encourage that private sector investment to come into Michigan.
Yeah, so I guess back to certainty, I think the role of policymakers is to provide the certainty of prioritization of just initiatives or economic development or certain goals for the state. And again, from the climate and energy perspective, we have our clean energy laws that require clean energy, 100% clean energy by 2040. But then we have again the My Healthy Climate Plan with a time frame through the next few decades. And all of those signals ultimately are designed to ensure that we are not only aware of the projects that could use leverage financing, but that ultimately we are also, on behalf of our state's clean energy projects and leading companies, recruiting, attracting that capital back. And so one of the strategic initiatives of our office is actually focused on building capacity for growing the ecosystem for climate finance within the state. We already have a state green bank, but we've actually also launched a public-private partnership known as the Michigan Climate Investment Hub that is located in this building. And that's exclusively focused on better understanding what the climate and clean energy projects are within the state, across sectors, and ultimately establishing those relationships with investors, financing institutions, both within and outside of the state to make sure there's that capital flow. And so yes, there's sort of this certainty behind where there are shared interests or goals, including transportation electrification, again, how AVs, their deployment might help us achieve our climate goals. That fits squarely into the purview of what this partnership particularly is looking to support.
Can I add something? I would just add that we don't have a strong engagement on the policy side, but if there was, I think it's in the public interest to have some level of standardization around these depots. The way that oftentimes they're set up is on some kind of lease base where they might pay a Voltera for an extended period of time for utilization, but we're really excited about having standards so that new fleets can use them in the future. This is not about a transportation mode for the next 10 years, but the next 20 and 30, and having interoperability. We've started to figure it out, I think, on the EV charging side with a couple of new entrants of charging standards. But we really want to see that also when you have like an automated depot that can accept not just any AV that's a robotaxi right now, that's like the first market, but when this comes to the public, every OEM is coming up with their automation strategy. Robotaxi is a market, but a much larger market, particularly in the US, is going to be the personally owned market. So we need to be thinking about how do we make infrastructure that's not just for these fleets, even though that's definitely the interest for the short term.
So I'm thinking about that, John, going back to what you said about all of those pieces that come together, what are the bottlenecks that exist today? And what are some ways to address them? I'm thinking about things like permitting and power supply and regulatory policy. What are the things, thinking about getting a site up to construction, what does that look like?
Sure, yeah, me too. Yeah, I mean, the first bottleneck that we have is typically just finding properties to do this, right? We start out with a relatively small, so it might be a big metropolitan area, and then within that we have the ODD, right, which is the area where they operate. And so that leaves you already with a smaller set of properties, and then you have to look at the ones that are the right size, the right shape, that are affordable, that you can get permitting, that are zoned appropriately, that maybe have decent curb cuts, that maybe have the appropriate traffic speed. By the time you do all that, you have a vanishingly small number of sites, right? So then the next step is, okay, let's go take a look at power, right? So, okay, how do we go work with the utility? That might be 12 to 18 to 24 month time frame. And then the third thing is working with the city, right? One piece of zoning, so for example, I shared this anecdote at Herbivore, so if anybody's there and heard it, you can just laugh at it. First time hearing it. So in the city of LA, it is a approved land use to raise goats, but not to have an AV Maybe we'll live here for the first time. Yeah. So all three of these things, by the way, the land, the power, and the permitting, have to work perfectly in parallel to get a site live, right? So one thing that we've really learned at Voltera, and we've done this, I think post-merger with Revel, we will have stuff in different stages in 40 different cities. So we've done this in a bunch of different places, but really what we've learned that the trick to getting sites live in a reasonable time frame for our customers is being able to not just solve one, but to manage all three of these challenges simultaneously up to that site going live and vehicles being the power, the permitting, and the land office.
Erin, once it is live, what are the kinds of things that could still emerge as that bottleneck? Are there ways that you have to work through them?
Yeah, after we see the sites are live, a lot of the fleets are trying to get as many vehicles served by that depot as possible. Some of the inefficiencies we see are really just about what's the standard operating procedure at a site. So when it's manual operations, since data are covering charging and cleaning and inspection, the number one priority is to plug it in because it's such a long task in comparison to the others. So what you actually find is that an individual is getting interrupted while they're cleaning a different vehicle because another one just showed up, and their key goal and what they're measured on is throughput. So we're really focused on making sure that throughput, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself here, but that throughput is so important. Our solution is able to increase efficiency of how staff support a site by 75%, but also creating that predictability of as soon as this vehicle shows up, it's X number of seconds for it to get plugged in. As soon as it hits 80% state of charge, it's X seconds to get it plugged out, so that you can create that predictability for all of the vehicles that are also in the field that need to get charged.
Yeah, it's tempting to think that this is a problem that you can just throw megawatts at, but like Erin said, it's throughput that scales fleets. It's not the megawatts, right? It's your ability to get a vehicle in and then back out on the road doing paid rides. And it's the flow and the reliability of the site that is really the
Alessandra, we hear about the idea of the amount of land that's needed and to make sure all of those things line up. Is that something that Michigan has? Is that something that the state looks at to pull together, or what are the ways from kind of the government side to approach that kind of land use and getting all of those things to line up?
I'll say first, and being on the panel with the experts on either side of me, it's very clear that part of that question depends on where we're talking about in the applications and ultimately the type of deployment. Because yes, the absolute answer, the objective answer is sure. There are a lot of places where this can go, but where matters, right? That's integral to this conversation. But with that sort of aside, what I will offer maybe as a parallel and especially again from the climate and energy sort of experience of the city is we are very well acquainted with siting questions, especially when we think through utility scale siting of infrastructure, and that's solar panels and battery storage to, of course, data centers. I mean, when our office thinks about siting of any type of project, your point about making sure there are a series of things that are happening at the same time is well taken, is true, but ultimately I think for us at the state level, because we wouldn't be involved in a local project necessarily, I think this goes back to that question of who's conducting the outreach, who's sort of building awareness around the existence of these projects in the first place, what's kind of the holistic point of view at the state level, and where's the transparency behind communicating what's going on. And you can't just throw megawatts at it, but there's hosting capacity maps. There are other things that at the state level, there can be sort of coordination around the longer term planning, such that at the local level these projects occur seamlessly and it's consistent with state goals.
Erin, you touched on this a minute ago in your answer, but we're talking about autonomous vehicles, and I can't help but think about autonomous technology in the charging of these vehicles. And you talk about how quickly they have to plug out. Are there ways that process is automated and how robotics will play a role in it? What does that look like?
So we actually just announced our solution for Robotaxi. It's an overhead rail-mounted solution with a robot that plugs in and plugs out each vehicle, supporting up to 10 bays per robot. So that's our approach to the market. It's really about how to make sure that the vehicles that are on the road can be supported. So we even take on the task of actually opening the charge port cover. Because some existing fleets have charge port covers that are designed for a human to push it and then open it. So we got to take over that responsibility. There's a lot of other competing technologies that are out there. I even saw that there's an inductive road out here. So there are different technologies. I've been in the EV industry for 10 years and I've never seen OEMs decide on one way to charge a vehicle, where the inlet location is, that we're all going to do inductive. So we chose a solution that fits the 2026 fleet needs. So open to things being different in the future, but this is about making sure we can support the vehicles that are out there today.
Yeah, I think automation absolutely has a role to play in the sites of the future. I think for the last, we've been doing this for 3 or 4 years at Voltera, and I think still right now the number one thing that our customers care about is deployment velocity, that is getting live in a new city and doing pay rides. But we know that because the time frame to develop a site is 18 months already, our customers are starting to think, okay, once that site's up, how do we get really good efficiency within the site? Just on the, from a Voltera perspective, right, we have an entire technology team within our ops group that is focused just on this challenge of how do we make our sites more efficient, how do we make our customers happy. We pursue a mix of build, buy, and partner strategies, including about a lot of talks with a friend of Voltera, Erin Galiger. And and that spans all the stuff that I'm going to say, right? So we've looked at different technologies that plug in a vehicle, that scan the body for damage, that change a tire, that maybe predict when a charger is going to fail. I don't think we're somewhere close yet to, the goal here is not to replace the humans, right? Or it's not to do a science project or technology for technology's sake, but our customers are the largest and most demanding fleets in the world. So we're constantly having to refine our solutions to find a better way to deliver those ongoing services on site, and automation is important.
So last question for each of you. What's one thing you're seeing happening today that is giving you signs of progress? Want to take that first?
Yeah, so I've been doing energy stuff for 26 years and EV stuff for a decade, and I've been going to conferences for that same amount of time, where every conference they oh, the EVs are coming, clean, safe, electric, blah, blah, blah. It's for real, it's here. So I took my 9-year-old kid on vacation in San Francisco a few months ago, and he rode in a Waymo. And I mean, he was fascinated, but it became within a couple rides just a normal thing to him, right? It was just amazing to me that after a couple trips, we go to SFO to leave, and he says, "Oh, are we taking a human ride, or are we going autonomously?" I'm what a question! That wasn't even something you would have asked 2 years ago. So, it's here, it's real, this is why Voltera is focused on it, and it's exciting to me who's been doing this for a long time to see that this is an actual thing that any human can just walk outside and do in a big city environment.
I guess I would say that it's easy for me to say, and it is true, that it's great to see that our renewable energy capacity is increasing in the state, our EV registrations, but also just frankly the types of players who are starting to engage the state government. If it's OEMs, getting interested in Public Utility Commission cases and proceedings, to just the types of conversations we have at the Climate Office, I think it's really indicative of the fact that we're not waiting around anymore, actually getting to do this work.
Erin?
Similar to John, I don't have a 9-year-old child, but I do have an 84-year-old grandmother who's in Arizona, and I'm really excited about her to continue to have like that mobility, even as I'm like, let's take those keys away, because she's gonna be in like the Waymo ODD, and not quite yet, but soon, and like that makes me really excited about her mobility, her independence. She's super active. She's working on her PhD right now. This woman is amazing. So like for her to continue to have that, while also meeting the needs of safety of the public. Let's go with this case.
Well, thank you all very much. Please join me in thanking our panelists.